længe aldrig bare. Hi, my name is Morten. I'm a physiotherapist from Denmark. I have a background in pain science from King's College in London and a PhD from Aalborg University in neuroplasticity and pain. I'm sitting here in my office in Aarhus, where I live, just back from Montana, US, and going to Greece tomorrow. So I'm glad we could find the time to do this interview here, and I'm looking forward to talking to you. So, about 30 years ago, I was doing my COM training or the manual therapy training for the diploma. And as part of that, I was doing a lot of supervision. And one of my supervisors gave me this book called Explain Pain. And it was just mind blowing. I was blown away, and I immediately grabbed my gears and drove down to Germany and did my first course with Hanno down in Hamburg. And it just blew my mind. And I went on a trajectory from there, just trying to understand what is all this pain about, and it was really, really rocketing my world. And that sort of was the limit of how much I could understand at the point. I spent a few good years trying to understand that. I got accredited as a NOI instructor. I was teaching EP courses, and as part of that, I met this wonderful guy, Tim Beams, who I assume some of you know. And I was just amazed by the amount of knowledge that he had on the topic. Because all the things that I was wondering when I was saying something, is it really true? Is this really what goes on? Then he would know the answer to that. He would know, yes. And because he could say, this is right. Yeah, of course, this is how it goes. I was just amazed about his knowledge. And I sort of picked his brain a bit. And he told me he was doing a complete master's program, a 2-year master's program in London on pain science. I was like, oh, why in London? Why not in Denmark, where I live? And I was doing PhD courses around at different universities, trying to pick up some of the bits, but there wasn't really any place where you could get that sort of coherent understanding of what pain science is really about. So there was this NOI conference in Nottingham some years back. And at that point, I had my first real sort of intermezzo with Professor Mick Thacker. And we got along really well. And he said, I'll have a seat for you in King's College if you want to come over to London and do the course. So I went up straight after that. I went up, called my wife. I said, I have this idea. What about you stay with the kids in Denmark and I commute between Denmark and London for 2 years to do an MSc program? And to my very big surprise, he said, that's a great idea. So I went back and forth to London for 2 years. And if I was blown away by Explain Pain, then sitting there with Professor Mick Thacker and hearing that coherent story about how philosophy and biology can be combined in one setting was just mind-blowing. I was completely taken. And my understanding of why academia is so important was just, it just really got to me. And I knew immediately that there's so many people out there who want to know about pain, and there's so little places they can go. Just like myself, I had to go to London to do these things. So there's definitely someone who can spend their life trying to help others understand what pain is about and providing opportunities for education that doesn't necessitate for people to travel away from their families for 2 years. So that has sort of been my trajectory. Even by my last year at King's College in 2011, was when I started teaching courses slowly that went sort of away from the main path. When I say the main path, I mean the Explain Pain core idea that pain and tissue damage doesn't relate and all of this, which is still, of course, a core message. But understanding the science that really backs that up has been such an amazing trajectory for me. And I've been doing that since 2011. And that was sort of the reason I did my PhD, and it's the reason I've been engaged with all of these things, getting great experiences going around the world, but also being attached to Aalborg University, where I'm teaching now, and the work I'm doing as vice chair for the educational committee at the European Pain Federation, and some sparking ideas that comes out of that, and different sprouts that just keep growing. But I think the main root in all this is my own experience of there's so much to know and there's so little places to go. So what role can I play in that? That was a long answer, sorry. Really, it's the way I structured my courses. So the 4 basic courses I do, 2-day courses, and they're just basically the sections in the curriculum matches more or less exactly the courses I'm doing. In Denmark, I'm doing we call it the basic of pain science. And then the second one is neuroscience. So it's a 2-day full-on only neuroscience. Then there's one on measurement and assessment. And then there's one on treatment and understanding the sort of, we call them syndromes, but what do we really know about low back pain? What do we really know about fibromyalgia? What do we really know about post-surgical pain? These are the things that we teach, or I teach people. Well, that's a really good question, and I think that's the driving question that I ask myself almost, if not on a daily basis, then at least on a weekly basis. I think the way I understand it now, and I think the best way for me to explain it is when I think back to my basic education, the core science that I knew about was anatomy, and as part of that, also biomechanics. So every time I see a patient, the only real science I can rely on, when I say real science, I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything, I'm just trying to differentiate between the basic sciences and the applied or clinical sciences, which are completely equal. But in terms of understanding how nature works, so in this case, how the human body works, anatomy and biomechanics is one way to look at it. And then there's this new kid in town called neuroscience, which is not really that new, but it's a big topic. And the great thing about it is that it's not about tissues. It's about everything that relates to being a person, including consciousness. So it's sort of the science that encapsulates what pain might be. Yeah, so my understanding is that what we know about anatomy has given us lots of great opportunities to work with patients because it guides the way we deal with them. So if we see someone move faulty, we have an understanding of why their tissues might be equally or easily injured. Say, for instance, the anterior cruciate ligament in the knee, we know that medialization prones them to have a damage to that ligament. And that is great. However, once we realize that tissue damage and pain are not the same thing, then we need a different science to understand what pain is. And that's what neuroscience is to me. So understanding these basic sciences separately and not as part of the same thing is really mind-blowing for me. So that's what I'm spending most of my time on. I know there's a lot of great people out there, including, we talked about Tim already, didn't we? And I guess everyone knows David Butler and, of course, Roma Mosley. So these are people who have a tremendous understanding of how the brain works. And I love hearing them talk about how the brain works and how that relates to the patient. I would say my approach is slightly different. I understand that to a user level, but my real understanding is how the nervous system in general works, and in particular the science that gives us all the evidence we need to understand why does people hurt. So let me give a really simple example. If someone has an injury, then does that mean they have a tissue injury or does that mean they have pain? So if someone comes in running and they have damage or they have pain on the lateral side of the knee and they say it came when I ran, then we would say that's a runner's knee. But what is it really? Then some would say it's an overuse injury, but what is that really? Because if it was overused, why not just underuse it? Then the body, due to homeostasis, should sort of equal it out. And for some that works, that's great. But there is a better understanding of what's going on. And we call that peripheral sensitization. So we don't know if that's what's going on, but if peripheral sensitization is the best scientific explanation for what's going on, then the scientific treatment, evidence-based treatment, would be the same treatment as we would expect to use or to work for peripheral sensitization, which could be rest. But in this case, dealing with peripheral sensitization might be resting, could be sleeping, could be mindfulness or or it could be exercise, it could be any of these things, because the way neuroscience works is the way that we also understand pharmacokinetics or pharmacology, is that it's about how the molecules interact. So if that exercise reacts in the body, then we can understand that from a molecular perspective. If we believe that descending modulatory systems are activated by acceptance and commitment therapy, then we can understand that. So neuroscience is basically our common theory, science, to understand how all the things that we're doing to the patient has an influence on the patient. And anatomy just can't explain that. So the thing I'm trying to do is to provide these education opportunities for people who want to know more. And it's impossible to just start from, take a textbook, start from the front page and read it to the back page. It just won't work because there's a lot of basic knowledge, So I see my role as a teacher, as an instructor or educator, to provide the context and some principles. And the only way I can do that is by thinking or hoping that I've sort of spotted some of the trends out there in the neurosciences. So what I do is I give people the opportunity and this mechanism-based approach, which basically means what is peripheral sensitization and how would it look in the clinic? How would you assess it? How would you treat it? What is central sensitization or likelihoods of thereof? And what is it really and what do we call it? What is the theory behind it? What is it in the patient? How would we spot it in the clinic? And if we could treat it, how would we do that? And then the descending modulatory system, how does that tie into our interaction with the patient? And maybe how can we use these science-based techniques to understand the best way to deal with the patient? So in one end of the course, it's about why are we doing all the stupid things that we are doing? And why do they sometimes work? And why do they sometimes not work? And then we go into sort of the bit nerdy stuff about what is a neuron and how does it work, and what is sensitization in general, how does peripheral and central sensitization differentiate, and how do they look alike, what's the similarities, how we deal with them, and then about the descending modulatory system, what is it, and how do we see it in the clinical practice. And then from there, that will be sort of the scientific perspective. We go out to the clinical perspective and say, how would you assess these things in the patient? What is the patient saying? How does it feel to be in pain? How you deal with that? What is the role of communication when you are interacting with a patient who is suffering from pain? All of these things would be sort of the secondary or the other part of the course. And then I try as an educator to balance them out and give a coherent understanding of how does one tie into the other and what happens when they don't, because they don't always. Well, it's a really easy question. It's giving you the opportunity to actually be with your patient and worry about your patient, not about what you know. Because once you know it, you feel much more comfortable and you can deal with the patient in a much more professional way. So I think the only real change that's happened in pain science is probably not in pain science, it's in our understanding of how important a person is. It's been really based on experts and you need to know everything, and once you know it, then you just deal with that body and the patient would be better. And pain science has really driven this forward, the understanding of how important patient involvement is and how important it is that the treatment is patient-centered, and how little important we really are in the outcomes of the patient. I guess the eureka moment for me when I read Explain Pain was that there was something called central sensitization, and it could explain all the things that I saw in the clinic, and it gave me this understanding that pain is really more than just the tissues. And I guess that's been the way for everyone when they sort of came across that concept at the first. And I know back in the 80s, 83, when they sort of came out with the articles, it had that influence on many people. And I think that the longer we go about it, the more we see that the signs that we were hoping would come out proving all the things that we see in the clinic just hasn't. So we cannot say for sure that there is actually anything called central sensitization in the human, or in particular in the patient. So that's something that we know is going on between neurons in the body. And it, as a biological principle, it's really good. But knowing that it doesn't necessarily explain what's going on with the patient has a quite important clinical impact, because it means that we are not dealing with central sensitization at any point. We're only dealing with the patient. And our theory about how the body works, including central sensitization, is driving how we work with patients. But we should always keep our eyes on the patient, not on the theory. Well, if I was to take a chronological approach to that, I would start when I was a child or an adolescent. I was doing lots of martial arts, something called Shinson Hapkido. And my grandmaster there, Sontanim Komyong is his name, he's been a tremendous influence on my life. And even though he's not himself a Buddhist, then the approach to the human as a Buddhist has really taught me a lot about humanism and how to deal with people. And then from there on, there's been lots of people in my world. I would say sort of the next big step in my understanding of patients was my clinical mentor, Flemming Enoch, who's a Danish physiotherapist, who has a massive understanding of how people are and work. And he's just a tremendous, so people will probably be familiar with Peter O'Sullivan and the way he deals with patient on stage. I was fortunate to work with Flemming very closely for many years. So that's exactly how he works with patients, and seeing how, Peter Sullivan works on stage is exactly what I was exposed to almost on a daily basis when I was at his clinic. It was fantastic. And of course, Ingrid, who showed me the Explain Pain book, has had quite a dramatic influence. And I would say then my friendship with Tim Beams has been very, very enlightening for me. And there's no way I could say that Mick has not been a big part of this. He has definitely blown my mind and given me an opportunity to understand this. And I'm very happy to also feel that Professor Lorimer Mosley, who I assume most of you know, is someone I've had quite some time with after, over the years, and I feel that he really is someone who can make me think about things in a different way. So I really appreciate the way he's approaching me and helping me to improve stuff that I'm doing as well. And I could probably go on, but I would say that the history in itself and all the big people in history, I find a good deal of understanding and enlightenment in reading old articles and how we came about maybe inventions and that sort of thing. If you were, to look on Google and find something, I would go for Explain Pain any day. I think that's the best written material out there that will give people an insight to what is pain all about. I would recommend that. And just as a side fact, I was interviewing Professor Loja, who is one of the founding fathers of IASP. And during our interview, he picked out Explain Pain from his bookshelf and said, "Do you know this book? I believe it's written by a physiotherapist." So I'm not the only one who think that book has had a tremendous influence on how we think about things. But equally, I would say if you have the opportunity to meet Mick Thacker, I keep coming back to this, but he was really, really, really something else. And he has a knowledge and a breadth of, understanding that is just amazing. So I would say from philosophy to biology, and he feels comfortable in all of these different aspects of that. So that will be my go-to persons. Something not everyone would know. That's I guess there's many things. The question is, what do I want to share? I guess there's not a lot of people who know I'm a proud father of 3 kids. One of them being an adult now, and she lives in Africa for half a year doing voluntary work, trying to help people, and is trajectorying into science and medicine. So that's one thing. Well, I think of Holland almost as Denmark, and I love Denmark quite a bit. So I think it's the one place in the world where you can just meet people, and the cultural differences are so small. It's only that sort of, they've got a slightly different language, So that's the only thing I think is different. First of all, it's local, so it's really easy to get to. There's a great airport, so it's easy to get to. But more than that, I think it's because there's people, well, in this case, in particular you, who is putting in all this effort in providing the opportunities for people to go there. And I think that's more important. So the organizer, to be honest, is the real important issue here. So this is a lot of, good words about you in this case.